Think about the last time you felt the need to explain yourself. Maybe someone looked at you a certain way and you immediately started talking. Maybe you made a decision, the right decision, and within seconds you were constructing a case for it, building a defense, offering evidence to a jury that never asked for a trial. Maybe you sent a message that was too long, too detailed, too transparent, because somewhere in your chest lived this unbearable need to be understood. Now ask yourself something harder. Did it work? Did the explanation earn you respect? Did the justification bring you closer to being seen the way you wanted to be seen? Or did something shift? Something subtle, something you felt but couldn't name, where the person across from you leaned back slightly, recalibrated, and without a single word, understood that you needed something from them. That shift is the subject of everything that follows. Niccolo Machiavelli spent his life studying power, not as an abstraction, not as a moral question, but as a living, breathing mechanism that moves through human beings the way electricity moves through wire. And one of the most devastating observations he ever made was this: the prince who justifies his decisions has already weakened them. The moment a ruler begins to explain, he signals that the legitimacy of his position depends on the approval of others. And approval, Machiavelli understood, is the one currency that evaporates the moment you reach for it too eagerly. You have been taught that explanation is courtesy, that transparency is virtue, that the decent thing, the humble thing, is to make yourself legible to the people around you. But what if that teaching was never designed to serve you? What if the compulsion to explain yourself is not a sign of your integrity, but a symptom of something far more dangerous, a need for validation so deep that you surrender your power before any confrontation even begins? Stay with this, because what you are about to understand will not make you colder. It will make you free. There is a confession hidden inside every explanation you have ever given, and it has nothing to do with the words themselves. When you explain why you made a choice, you are implicitly communicating that the choice requires defense. When you justify your silence, you are confirming that your silence needs justification. When you preemptively address what someone might think of your behavior, you are revealing that their opinion already lives inside you, that it has already moved in, rearranged the furniture, and begun shaping how you act. Machiavelli observed that power is never truly about force, it is about perception, and perception does not respond to logic, it responds to signals. Every human being you interact with is reading signals constantly, most of them beneath conscious awareness. The way you pause before you speak, the way your eyes move when someone questions you, the way your sentences stretch and multiply when you feel uncertain. These are not neutral gestures, they are transmissions. When you over-explain, the transmission is unmistakable. I am not sure this is enough. I need you to agree with me. Your judgment determines my stability. Think about the people in your life who carry genuine authority, not loudness, authority. The ones whose decisions feel final, the ones who, when they say something is done, it is done. Do they explain themselves at length? Do they construct elaborate justifications for why they did what they did? Or do they state, act, and move forward, leaving others to orbit their certainty rather than the other way around? Psychologists call this internal versus external locus of control. But Machiavelli didn't need the academic language. He simply observed that those who require permission, even the invisible social permission that comes from being understood, are those who can be steered, and those who do not require it are those who steer others. You have likely noticed this in confrontations. There is a particular kind of person who, when challenged, asks no clarifying questions and offers no elaborate defense. They absorb the challenge like it is weather, present, acknowledged, and ultimately irrelevant to their direction. You leave the interaction feeling strangely unsettled. Something was not given to you that you expected. The explanation, the reaction, the proof that your judgment had impact. That absence is not coldness, it is architecture, and Machiavelli built it deliberately. He wrote in The Prince that a ruler must be both the lion and the fox, the lion to confront force, and the fox to recognize traps. The trap he spent the least time discussing, but perhaps understood most deeply, was this one: the social trap of compulsory transparency, the expectation that power must justify itself, because power that justifies itself has acknowledged a higher authority, the court of public opinion, and once acknowledged, that court never stops convening. Ask yourself honestly, how many of your explanations were really attempts to control how someone felt about you? How many of your justifications were preemptive surrenders, giving away your reasoning before anyone asked for it, because the anxiety of being misunderstood was more unbearable than the cost of the disclosure? This is where it begins, not with what others do to you, but with what you hand them before they even reach out. To understand why explanation feels so natural, so morally necessary, you have to understand where the compulsion was built. It was not built by you, it was built in you. From the earliest years, you were placed inside systems that demanded legibility. School did not reward silence, it rewarded the raised hand, the correct answer delivered out loud, the demonstration of understanding performed for an authority figure. Your value in that room was directly proportional to your willingness to make your interior visible, to explain your reasoning, to show your work. Family operated on similar logic. Silence was suspicious. Unexplained behavior was disobedience. The child who acted without explanation was the child who invited punishment. And so you learned, viscerally, neurologically, that explaining yourself was survival, that transparency was the price of safety, that if you wanted to be understood, wanted to be loved, wanted to be left alone, you had better make yourself clear. Carl Jung described the mechanism that forms beneath this conditioning as the persona, the mask, constructed not from dishonesty, but from adaptation. You built a self that could survive the environment you were placed in, and in most environments, the self that survived was the one that explained, justified, and made itself available for judgment. The problem is that the mask fused. What began as strategy became identity. What began as adaptation became compulsion. And now you are an adult carrying the nervous system of a child who learned that silence is dangerous and explanation is armor. But armor is not power. Armor is defense, and a person in permanent defense has already conceded the offensive. Robert Greene, building directly on Machiavelli's insights in The 48 Laws of Power, identified this as one of the most reliably self-destructive patterns in social dynamics. The more you explain your actions to others, the more ordinary and questionable they appear. Explanation invites scrutiny. Scrutiny invites objection. Objection invites the negotiation of your own behavior, and once you are negotiating yourself, you have lost the frame entirely. Here is what the system did not teach you. The most powerful social position is not the one where everyone understands you. It is the one where everyone is slightly uncertain about you. Uncertainty creates gravity. It pulls attention. It demands interpretation. And in the space between your action and their interpretation, you hold enormous control. Control that evaporates the moment you fill the silence with explanation. Nietzsche saw this in the morality of herd culture, the way collective systems domesticate the individual by making them perpetually accountable to the group's comfort. The person who never explains themselves is threatening precisely because they have removed themselves from the accountability structure. They are not asking for permission, they are not applying for approval, they are simply being, and the herd does not know what to do with a creature that does not need its endorsement. You were trained to be readable. Machiavelli is asking you to consider what becomes possible when you are not. Pause here for a moment. Think about the relationships, the rooms, the conversations in your life where you have felt most compelled to explain yourself. What were you protecting? What were you afraid would happen in the silence? Write that down somewhere, because the answer to that question is the map of exactly where your power is currently leaking. Now we enter the territory that changes behavior rather than just perspective. Machiavelli did not merely diagnose the problem of over-explanation. He prescribed a discipline, a set of practiced behaviors so precise that they function less like advice and more like engineering. He understood that power is not a quality you are born with. It is a posture you inhabit through repetition until it becomes your default. The first principle of that posture is what could be called the discipline of the incomplete sentence. The powerful do not finish every thought for their audience. They offer enough to orient, not enough to satisfy. In negotiation, in conversation, in conflict, the person who speaks in complete, well-organized paragraphs of self-justification is the person who has handed the other a detailed map of their vulnerabilities. The person who speaks in measured, incomplete fragments forces the other to lean in, to interpret, to come to them. Machiavelli advised princes on the strategic use of ambiguity, not deception in the petty sense, but the deliberate refusal to make every position fully legible. When your intentions are unclear, you are difficult to oppose. When you are difficult to oppose, you are difficult to undermine. When you are difficult to undermine, you are, by the only definition that matters in social reality, powerful. The second principle is silence as a weapon of first resort, not last. Most people use silence reactively. They go quiet when they have nothing to say, or when they are hurt, or when they are calculating. The Machiavellian discipline inverts this entirely. Silence becomes the default, not the exception. Speaking becomes the deliberate act, not the automatic one. This single inversion restructures every social interaction you participate in. Consider what happens when someone accuses you of something, a criticism, a slight, an allegation. The conditioned response is immediate verbal defense. You correct the record, you explain the context, you demonstrate why the accusation is wrong or unfair, and in doing so, you have accepted the terms of the accusation. Now you are playing on their field, by their rules, defending a position they chose for you. The Machiavellian response is different. It is the long pause, the slight nod, the non-answer that is not evasion, but rather the quiet refusal to accept the frame being offered. Epictetus understood this from a different direction, the Stoic principle that you own your response, never the provocation. Machiavelli translated it into pure social mechanics. The person who controls the response controls the interaction. The third principle is selective disclosure as a form of power rather than secrecy. This is perhaps the most nuanced piece of the framework. Machiavelli was not advocating for the cold, robotic withholding of all information. He was advocating for intentionality, for the understanding that what you choose to reveal and when and to whom shapes the entire social reality you inhabit. There are people in your life who deserve your depth, your full reasoning, your genuine uncertainty and complexity. These are the people who have demonstrated through behavior over time that they can hold what you give them without using it against you. For these people and only these people, transparency is not weakness, it is intimacy, it is earned. Everyone else gets the surface, not hostility, not performance, just the surface, politeness without exposure, engagement without vulnerability, the weather, the game, the small talk that functions as social currency without costing you anything real. This is not manipulation, this is calibration, and calibration, Machiavelli would tell you, is the foundational act of any person who intends to survive in a world that does not reward openness, it rewards strategy. The fourth principle, and the one that requires the most practice, is the total elimination of the preemptive explanation. This is the explanation you give before anyone asks, the justification offered in anticipation of a judgment that hasn't arrived yet. You send the long message explaining why you didn't respond for 2 days. You describe your reasoning in detail before presenting your decision. You announce your intention so thoroughly that by the time you act, the act itself has been drained of authority. Stop, act, let the action stand. If a question comes, answer it briefly. If no question comes, the silence is not your enemy. The silence is the space where your authority lives. If this is making something in you resistant, if there is a voice that says, "But people will misunderstand me, but they'll think the wrong thing, but I need them to know," then you have just found the exact place where your power is being held hostage. That voice is not protecting you. It is keeping you legible to everyone except yourself. Now we arrive at the final insight, the one I have been building toward from the beginning. And I want you to understand that most people who have watched this far will nod at what comes next, agree with it intellectually, and then walk back into their lives and explain themselves in the very next difficult conversation they have. Because knowing is not changing. Knowing is only the beginning. The deepest truth about over-explanation is not that it signals weakness to others. It is that it signals something far more consequential to yourself. Every time you explain yourself without being asked, you are enacting a belief. The belief is this: I am not enough as I am. My actions are not enough. My choices are not self-evidently valid. I require external confirmation to be real. This is the invisible architecture of self-betrayal, not dramatic, not violent, just quiet, constant, repeated. The daily practice of outsourcing your legitimacy to the judgment of people who, in most cases, have not earned the right to hold it. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must never rely on fortune, on the goodwill of others, on luck, on the approval of the crowd, because everything that comes from outside can be taken from outside. The only thing that cannot be taken is what is built internally. And the internal structure he was describing is not arrogance, it is not contempt for others, it is something quieter and more radical, the genuine practiced indifference to whether you are understood. Not indifference to connection. Connection is human and real and necessary, but indifference to comprehension as a prerequisite for action. The freedom to move, decide, speak, and be without first securing the consensus of your audience. Jung called the shadow the repository of everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. And for many people, what lives in the shadow is not rage or desire or darkness. It is sovereignty, the part of you that knows you do not need permission, the part that has always known, the part that was conditioned out of you before you were old enough to defend it. Reclaiming it does not happen in a single decision. It happens in the accumulation of small refusals. The refusal to send the explanatory text, the refusal to justify the boundary you just set, the refusal to offer reasoning for a decision that is ultimately yours. Each of these refusals is a small act of self-possession, and self-possession, practiced long enough, becomes identity. There is a particular terror in this for people who have spent their lives being understood as a survival strategy. If I don't explain, will people think badly of me? And the answer, the honest answer, is yes. Some will. Some will call you difficult. Some will call you cold, arrogant, unavailable. And here is where Machiavelli issues his final and most brutal counsel. It is better to be feared than loved, because love is fickle and depends on the other, but fear, which in this context means respect held at distance, is a function of your behavior alone. It is something you generate, not something you receive. The people who matter, the ones capable of the depth you are actually looking for, will not be repelled by your restraint. They will be drawn to it, because restraint is rare, and what is rare has gravity. You don't explain yourself because you are humble. You explain yourself because you are afraid. And the moment you are willing to sit in the discomfort of being misunderstood, to let the silence hold what you cannot control, is the moment you stop being governable by the opinions of others. That moment is the shift. That is what Machiavelli was pointing at across 5 centuries of political philosophy. Not a trick, not a technique, a fundamental reorientation of where you locate your authority, outside yourself, in the approval of others, or inside yourself, in the quality of your choices. The authority does not move into you all at once. It accumulates, silence by silence, decision by decision, boundary by boundary, until one day someone looks at you across a room and feels it, that particular gravity, and cannot explain why you feel different from everyone else. You haven't said anything unusual. You haven't performed anything. You have simply stopped needing their confirmation. And in a world where almost everyone is silently begging to be understood, a person who has stopped asking is terrifying and magnetic and free. Most people watching this will understand it. Fewer will begin the practice. Fewer still will sustain it long enough for it to become instinct. That is not pessimism. It is Machiavelli's realism. The world does not change for those who understand it. It changes for those who are willing to be changed by what they understand. The question is not whether you grasp the concept. The question is what you do in the next conversation where the pressure builds, the silence stretches, and everything in your conditioning screams to fill it. That moment is the test, not the theory, the moment. What will you do with the silence?